Hello. This week's topic is governors. Please read Chapter 7 before you begin the written question for the week. But in this video, I'd like to give you a little bit of background on the topic. So governors are the chief executives of their state, similar to how we have a president at the federal level who runs the federal government. At the state level, governors are in charge of state governments. But not all governors have the same powers. They vary from state to state, as you'll read in Chapter 7. In the case of Michigan, our governor does have a fair amount of power given to him or her under the state constitution. The governor here can make appointments to state government, can appoint judges when there are vacancies, although judges are otherwise elected, but if there is a vacancy in their term, the governor can appoint their replacement. In the case of regular appointments to the executive branch, the governor has almost complete authority over who he or she appoints, unless the state senate says no, and that doesn't happen very often. Governors here in Michigan can recommend legislation to the legislature, which they often do during their State of the State address. They also have the authority to veto bills passed by the legislature. As the authors of your book point out, there are different types of veto. One example would be the package veto, which means that a governor vetoes the entire bill. And there's also a line item veto, which we have here in Michigan, which allows the governor to single out parts of the bill that he or she does not like to veto, but while signing the rest of the bill. That usually applies only to spending bills. The governor of Michigan, as well as other governors, has the authority to issue executive orders, which are orders to the state government to do something based on a law that's been passed, and executive directives, which are similar to orders but have a different purpose in terms of their goal. But it's the idea that the governor is making recommendations to the state or making orders to the state to do something. And again, we're talking about state government. In Michigan, there are somewhere around 50,000 state employees, most of whom work in Lansing, but they also are spread out across the state. And the governor has under his or her authority a cabinet, which includes different departments of state government. So a health department, a department dealing with agriculture, a department dealing with business and regulatory affairs. There's a department dealing with the environment, environmental quality, and a few others. Not all state departments are under the governor's authority. For example, the Michigan Department of Education is actually under the authority of the State Board of Education, which is an elected body, and that's provided for in our state constitution. Also, the governor does not have direct authority over the Department of Civil Rights, which has a commission that runs it. But most of the state departments are under the governor's authority. Also, I should point out that the office that we are probably most familiar with in the state, Secretary of State's office, is not under the governor's direct authority. It's actually under the authority of the Secretary of State, who is elected by voters in our state. In terms of other things I wanted to mention about the powers of governors and their role, the authors talk about the formal and informal powers of a governor, so please read through that material in the reading. I should also point out that governors have serving with them a lieutenant governor. He or she would be similar to a vice president at the federal level, the second in command of state government. If something should happen to the governor while he or she is in office, the lieutenant governor takes over. That is the case here in Michigan. In our state, the governor and lieutenant governor run together as a ticket during the election time. And so if the governor is elected, his or her choice for lieutenant governor is elected along with him or her. That's not the case in every state. In some states, the lieutenant governor is elected separately. So you have a unique situation in some places where the governor and lieutenant governor are different parties. In terms of elections, governors run usually in 4-year terms. For 4-year terms, our governor can serve two full 4-year terms. We have term limits on our governor. Those term limits were put in the 1990s. Other states have similar term limits, but there are states that have no term limits on their governor. So there are places where the governor could run in as many times as he or she would want and get elected. The governor of the state is, again, in charge of state government, is also in charge of the state, the National Guard, which is the militia of the state, unless that militia is federalized for some reason. but they are under the authority of the governor of the state. Governors have a wide range of backgrounds. Most have had some experience in government, usually as either a legislator in the state legislature or serving in an executive capacity, maybe as Attorney General or Secretary of State or some other high-level position in state government. But it is not a requirement that a governor have professional background in state government. The Governor Snyder was a businessman before he was elected to be governor of Michigan, and had never run for office before. Prior to Governor Snyder, Governor Granholm, for whom I worked in the 2000s, right after she was elected, and I worked for her for 2 years. She was the Attorney General of our state before she was elected governor. And just really quickly, as I mentioned, I did work for Governor Granholm, and I wanted to give you a little bit of background about working on the governor's staff. I worked on Governor Granholm's staff on education policy in the early 2000s. Every governor has a staff of people who help him or her do the job. Many of those people are appointed by the governor. They do not have to be approved by any legislative body, but they serve as people who help the governor do the job by providing advice or doing research, as I did for Governor Granholm. And the governor also has speechwriters and press aides and a lot of other senior staff who are responsible for helping the governor do the job to which they were elected. There is a budget for those positions, and those employees get paid by state government during the time they're serving. The office is in the state capitol, but there also is an office building near the capitol in Lansing called the Romney Building, which is where most of the governor's staff work. So if you're ever up in Lansing, you probably would not get into the Romney Building, but you could certainly tour the state capitol, and you can see the governor's ceremonial office in the state capitol, along with the portraits of our governors. Michigan has had 48 governors thus far since we became a state. So in any event, that's a little bit of background on this topic. Please read the chapter carefully. If you have any questions, please ask, and have a great week.